Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is our first CE of the year. It's a beautiful day, so I appreciate that you're sitting in and listening to us talk for a couple hours. We're kind of a full house today, so if you're just coming in the door, there's some seats available in the front still. Because this is a new regulation and kind of a hot topic, we're going to be recording the presentations today. So we've been trying to get a consent form around. We need a consent form signed by everybody. We're going to make the video available online after the class. So if you know of anybody that couldn't make it today and is interested in seeing the presentations and the equipment, you can tell them, go ahead and get on our website and that'll be available. We're going to be hearing from two people today. First is Fong with the Department of Pesticide Regulation. He's going to be talking about the closed mixing system regs and some new PPE regulations. And then we'll take a quick break, and then we will have Doug Fort with Kellogg Supply, and he's going to be talking about some closed mixing systems and have them here for you guys to look at. So feel free to ask questions. And then our almost entire PUE staff is here today, so if you want to talk to your district inspector at all, they will be available. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Harvard. Thank you.
And I guess I'm online here. I'm online? Okay. Let's see. That's the razor laser. That's the advancer. Yeah, my name is Harvard Fong with the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, Worker Health and Safety Branch, Industrial Hygiene Services, which sounds impressive, then you realize it's just me. So, and we're going to talk today about the changes in closed system regulations, which went into play on January 1st of this year, and also the PPE regulation changes, which occurred, does anybody know? July 1st. Everyone agree? Yeah, the county's here writing the right tickets, so make sure you agree. Okay. Closed systems we're going to talk about first. Now, some background on this whole closed system issue. Technical changes concerning closed systems have been occurring over the decades. Closed systems came into play back in the 70s, late 70s, when they developed the whole closed system concept. And back then, you were dealing with materials that were fairly toxic. Chlorinated hydrocarbons like Myrex, heptachlor, what else was there? Chloridane, and organophosphates like phosgene, parathion, tetraethylpyrophosphate. In fact, when I started with the Department of Pesticide Regulation in 1980, it was not uncommon for there to be fatalities associated with mixer loader applicators, mixer loaders primarily. Because mixer loaders are dealing with what? Concentrate, the most dangerous form of the material. A lot of those, however, materials are no longer available. They're no longer registered in the United States. So over time, this led to a rethinking of the whole closed system requirement. Those Category 1 materials that are in existence now are less systemic poisons, less make-you-drop-dead poisons, and more of a corrosive hazard to the eye and skin. And that's why we thought maybe the closed system requirements need to be updated. And I know you're amazed that the government actually is thinking about updating something, right? Yeah. Well, the components of an exposure event, you have to have three things for an exposure event. One is the source, and the source for you guys is what? Pesticides. Okay, you're going to have a source. The other thing is the receiver. Who's the receiver? You or your employees. The third thing that has to have in an exposure event is the route. Well, you're going to have your source. You're going to have your receivers. What is the one thing you can affect? The route, how it gets to the guy. Can you break the route? If you can break the route, you prevent exposure. Now, there are basically two types of exposure systems. There's direct exposure, splash, spray, or spill. Pretty straightforward. And indirect exposure, residue drift, off-gassing. Mixer loaders, not really much indirect exposure. Most of the time, if they're going to be exposed, it's direct exposure events, splash, spray, or spill. Splash. Spray. Not pesticides, by the way. Spill. You've got the routes. What are the sources of the various exposure things? You can have undiluted pesticide, and as we said earlier, undiluted pesticide is what form of the pesticide? The most toxic, dangerous, hazardous, however you want to put it, the one that will do what? Potentially. Kill you, yes. In fact, I've also taught a course for emergency responders how to deal with pesticide events. And, you know, those guys love to come out there with the 2.5-inch hose and start hosing people down, right? Get them naked and scrub them off. Most of the time they say, you know, if someone's exposed to Roundup, you really don't need to do that to them probably. But if they're exposed to undiluted pesticide, yes, you want to give them the full hazmat treatment because it is a very dangerous form of the pesticide. It is the concentrate that can cause serious injury or fatality. Then you get to what? Application dilution. You take this undiluted pesticide and you put it into a tank full of what? In many cases, it's a lot of water. And that can change a lot of the characteristics, both physical characteristics and toxicological characteristics, making it slightly less toxic. If something is flammable in the 5-gallon container, if you pour it into 400 gallons of water, is it still likely flammable? No. Probably not. So you make changes in it when you have the application dilution. Then you get down to foliar residue, stuff that's on your target basically, the foliage and or the bug. Then there's off-target or non-target residue, which is in many cases is just, it's the way life is. When you're out there spraying with like a speed sprayer, stuff gets on the ground. Is that killing your bug? No. No, it's a off-target residue, not necessarily a bad thing, off-target residue. It's just, if you can make that pesticide droplet hit the bug right in the head, that'd be the best thing. Can't do it in most cases. There is, however, a type of off-target thing that is, to put it bluntly, evil. And that's what? Yeah, do you want to avoid drift whenever possible? Yeah. Avoid it like the plague. Drift is a bad thing. Drift, and also drift has this tendency. You know, tornadoes search out what? Mobile home parks. It's a law of nature. Drift events search out nursery schools and busloads of nuns and orphans. That's what drift events will try and find. You don't want that to happen because you don't want to show up on Channel 10 News, right? No. So drift events, a type of off-target residue you definitely want to avoid. Finally, degradation products, not very important in terms of mixer, loader, or applicator. But most pesticides do degrade to less toxic materials. There are some that actually degrade into more toxic materials on the way down to degrading to less toxic materials, but not a big deal for mixer loaders. What we're mostly worried about for mixer loaders and applicators, undiluted pesticide application dilution. Stuff like this. You know, back in the day, how many remember pesticides with the good names? Doom. Kibosh, not Symphony or Happy Days or Lasso. It told you, Doom, Kibosh. Very straightforward. Kind of a little blast from the past here. Now, closed systems are considered an engineering control. An engineering control, it's a device or action, and this is a definition from industrial hygiene. It's a device or action that automatically isolates or physically limits the exposure to the hazard, thereby reducing the risk to personnel. Your classic example of these are things such as, how many have seen pulley assemblies? You see pulleys? Usually a pulley has what over it? Some kind of guard, cage, to prevent you from doing what? Yeah, to prevent you from only being able to count up to, 8 on both hands. So, yeah, in fact, my grandfather worked in the lumber mills. He could count up to 7 on his hands. So they didn't have guards back in the day. It's pre-OSHA. So an engineering control prevents exposure automatically. You don't have to think about it. Your workers don't have to think about it. Engineering controls are built into the design of the equipment to minimize the hazard. They're very reliable to control worker exposure if you don't try to intentionally defeat them. Like, you ever heard about people taking dead man switches, putting tape around them? Bad idea. Do not try to break your engineering control, as long as controls are designed, used, and maintained properly. Now, in engineering control of exposure, when we put people in PPE, what are we essentially doing to them? We're protecting them. We are essentially putting them into a box, a safety box. Now, that's all well and good. How many have worn PPE? How many have worn like coveralls, Tyvek? How many noticed that the Tyvek, usually the crotch is down here by the knee? Yeah, they're kind of difficult to wear. Now, if you could remove or reduce the level of PPE, would that be a good thing? Well, some people are probably going, oh, I love this. I love wearing this stuff. Right. So if we could put the box around the pesticide, what could we do about the box around the worker? Reduce it or remove it. So, now back in the day, and this is, you probably remember if you've dealt with closed systems depended upon signal words. Signal words, category 1 is danger. Danger by itself simply means the material is corrosive to the eyes or skin. Danger poison means it may not only be corrosive to the eyes or skin, but also has a systemic property, makes you sick. Systemic property. Category 1. What's this next category? Category 2, the signal word is what? Warning. You know, think of it. Will Robinson. Yeah, Will Robinson. Warning, warning. Yeah. Category 2, warning. Slightly less toxic material. Still make you sick. These are all based, by the way, these categories 1, 2, and category 3. Caution. Usually they're based on what's called the lethal dose. 50% of the population, when they do the rat studies, means 50% of the rats drop dead. Doesn't mean the other 50% are having margaritas on the beach. They're just not dead yet. So you don't want to volunteer for LD 50 studies. You definitely do not want to volunteer for LD 100 studies. LD 0 is pretty good. Signal words were used to determine if a closed system was required back in the day, before January 1st of this year. Any liquid or liquefiable category 1 material had to be mixed loaded through a closed system. Now, signal words, well, to determine the requirement for a closed system, signal words are now, yeah. Do you get the idea that I own a thesaurus? That's one thing, but also signal words are no longer the thing that trigger or tell you what type of closed system you're supposed to use. We've moved away from that. Now, under the new regulation 6746 closed systems, the operative signifiers are found in the precautionary statements of the pesticide label. Do you know what a precautionary statement of the pesticide label is? Everyone say yes, because you have to read the what? Yeah, okay. So, the precautionary statement, bingo, bingo, there it is. Precautionary statements are required parts of pesticide labels. And that's where you will find the signifier words. Depending on the precautionary statement, pesticides requiring closed systems are subject to different closed system types known as Tier 1 and Tier 2. How do you find out the tier you're supposed to use? Well, you read the label. Yes. And on a Tier 1 material, the precautionary statement will have the phrase, fatal if absorbed through skin or comparable language. You'll notice, are there any weasel words in front of fatal? No. No. So basically, it's you're gonna die if you get it on your skin. Tier 1, also known as a classic system. Tier 2, what's this? Everyone say these two words. Maybe. They are what kind of words? Weasel words, right? I'll get that in a minute. They may be fatal if absorbed through skin, maybe, or the phrase corrosive causes skin damage is in the precautionary statement. That triggers Tier what? 2. So, no doubt about it, Tier 1, may be fatal or corrosive, causes skin damage. You notice a little asterisks there? What's that mean? The fact that if it's corrosive to the skin, it's very likely corrosive to the eyes. So we didn't put that in the regulation. So, what does corrosive mean, by the way? Corrosive refers to a substance that has the power to cause irreversible damage or destroy another substance. You've seen that icon, right? On the back of trucks. Corrosive effects. Before you lose your breakfast, this is my daughter and her Halloween makeup. But that's what corrosion looks like. I looked on, I was trying to find corrosion pictures on the web. Don't look. You can't stop seeing it after you've seen them. They're pretty bad. This, however, is actual corrosion of a hand. So that's what we're talking about, corrosive effects. A Tier 1 system we're talking about a classically poisonous material, stuff that will make you die if it gets on your skin, okay? And it may also have eye or skin damaging properties. It is a systemic poisoning that can occur from skin contact and or inhalation. Primarily, we're worried about skin contact. A Tier 2 system, the chemical is corrosive to the skin or eyes, possibly more than likely irreversible damage. It may also have some systemic toxicity, but not as bad as a Tier 1 material. What is the difference between a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 system then? A Tier 1 system must remove pesticide from the container, rinse the container, extract the rinsing without removal from the extraction system. It sounds just like what? Your classic closed system. A Tier 1 system is a classic closed system. The one you've been using all these years is now considered a Tier 1 system. A Tier 2 system must remove the pesticide from the container. You'll notice there's nothing after that, right? What's that mean? The container rinsing and subsequent rinsate removal can be done otherwise. In other words, you can hand pour rinsate with a Tier 2 material. So, to give you an idea, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 1s are classics. And the original slides that I showed to the counties several months ago, I had old Coke, classic Coke and new Coke. How many remember that big controversy back in the day? Yeah, there's like 3 people here. The rest of these young people go, what's he talking about Coke? So I found something that everyone understands is a classic and a new. Classic, right? New. Tier 2. Now, the types of systems that exist include suction extraction system, relies on extracting material from the original container, designed to rinse the container interior and itself. Sealing is not necessarily tight, which is one of the disadvantages of the particular one here. This is a chem measure, chem probe. Those are no longer being manufactured, though. If you have them, they can still be used. Also, the goat throat is another suction extraction system. It pulls this material out. There's an example of it right there you can take a look at later. Container breaching system. It punctures or slices the container, releasing the contents into a secondary container, the box, and then that box is plumbed to deliver the stuff to your tanks. These were actually known back in the days as Goodwin boxes. However, the company Goodwin no longer makes them. Other companies do make them, but we still call them Goodwin boxes. You see, it basically cuts a hole in the container. One drawback of a Goodwin box, it's a great system. It isolates the stuff inside there. If something is inside there, can anybody be exposed to it? No. But what does it do? You use the whole container. There are no partials with a Goodwin box or a container breaching system. Here's some more examples. There's homegrown ones. People made them themselves. There's an example from PBM sprayers out of Chico of one. There's also direct drop gravity feed system. The coupler locks onto the container, and then that coupler locks to the mix tank here. There's an integrated sprayer that blasts water in there to clean it out. Key thing with these is you can do partials in many cases with them. Soterra was the one that pioneered that type of system. They no longer make them, but other companies have developed their own direct drop gravity feed systems. You'll hear about more of that later. There's the Micromatic, the Banjo PBM hybrid, the Easy Flow. So those are all direct drop gravity feed systems. They depend on gravity getting the stuff down to the container. Isolated hand pour. It combines hand pouring ability with the isolation of the hazardous pesticide. Basically, it's a glove box. A glove box, like they use for Ebola, like they use for plutonium. If it's good enough for Ebola and plutonium, is it good enough for pesticides?
Well, you'd think so.
One would hope so, yeah. So, and what this company did, this Mans & Sons, they built their own, and we thought, that's a great idea. These are huge, too. Both of these, it's a dual unit. It's as big as the truck. And that's the interior. You can hand pour. There's a rinsing system in there. It's really cool. So that we call isolated hand pour, and there's a company that makes a commercial version of isolated hand pour. There's an example of it here, the Hypro. Once again, you put your hands in the gloves, you put your container in there, you seal the door, you can hand pour to your heart's content. Now, the regulations themselves, we're going to talk about the regulations themselves, 6746. A and B, you must use an appropriate closed system, one that works for what you want it to do and the chemical you're working with. It has to be capable of enclosing the pesticide while removing the contents, preventing the pesticide from contacting handlers or bystanders. Is this a good closed system coupling? No. Does this look like it's a good closed system coupling? No, yeah. Users must be trained in the specific use of the closed system and the requirements of Title III, 6724, handler training, of course. All PPE required by the label, permit, condition, or regulation must be at the work site. However, one thing that a closed system gives you is reduction in the PPE, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about PPE. PPE required to be worn will be dependent, like I said, on the PPE section we're going to talk about later. There is a reduction in PPE when you use a closed system. Protective eyewear must always be worn when using a closed system at all times. And I'm going to talk about that later too on PPE. My big thing is always wear eye protection. All the time when you're working with pesticides. Now the system must remove the pesticide from its original container via hoses, pipes, and couplings. No exposure to the handler. Same applies to the rinsate and finished mix of a Tier 1 system. All elements of the system must be able to withstand the chemical exposures and pressures generated, and the equipment must be maintained. A Tier 1 system, like we said, is capable of rinsing the original container and transferring rinsate while still attached. Tier 1 rinsing system must provide adequate rinsing as defined in 6684, triple rinse thing. It cannot overpressurize the original container and cause it to rupture, like that. A Tier 1 system must incorporate pre-disconnect rinsing of the container. Like I said, classic closed system. Rinsing system, can't see it very clearly. Here's water shooting out. That's a gravity drop. There's a Goodwin box. Tier 2 systems can have a separate rinsing system, or they can incorporate pre-disconnection rinsing of the container. Can you use a Tier 1 chemical or a Tier 2 chemical in a Tier 1 system? Yes. Can you use a Tier 1 chemical on a Tier 2 system? No. This is good. Everyone's on top of everything here. Did they hand out the answers ahead of time here?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Reminds me of college, cheating. Okay, but see here, we got the rinsing system. There's the rinsate going down. Way to go. Tier 2. The operating instructions must be written and legible. And this includes, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but even if you have a homemade system, you need to type out the operating instructions for them. You have to have them available. So even if you're using a homemade system, a non-commercial system, you have to write out the instructions of what you do with your homemade system. That's going to be required. See, we don't want the instructions to look like this either. Dead Sea Scrolls, no. We want the instructions to look more like that. Instructions must include operating procedures, maintenance, cleaning, repair, restrictions, and procedures for handling partials, if your equipment can handle partials. It must be maintained as specified in the written operating instructions. So make sure, if you've got your homegrown system, that you type out sometime real soon the instructions. They don't have to be very convoluted and detailed, just straightforward. What do you do? Page and a half. There are exemptions to the closed system regulation, by the way. Exemption 1 is the label-mandated method or device. If the label has a specific way of doing it, of removing material, an example, I don't even know if they still make it, the Temic lock and loads, they had their own system for moving Temic granular out of it. You have to use the proprietary system if the manufacturer has that. Foil seal removal and reseal is not a violation. That was a technical issue. When you peeled off the foil seal of the chemical you were dealing with, were you technically in violation of the closed system regulation? Yes. It wasn't closed. It was open. But we realized you got to pull off the seal. So removing the seal and then attaching the system is not a violation. If it's a regulatory sampling, if the county comes by and says, yeah, can I have a cup of that? That you don't do the closed system. If it's a returnable container that is not required to be rinsed, you don't have to do the rinsing system. And finally, if it is 1 gallon or less of a Tier 2 material, you can hand pour 1 gallon or less. And this is slightly different from the previous regulation. The previous regulation said you can hand pour a gallon container. This one says you can hand pour 1 gallon. Can you pour it from a 2.5 gallon container? Yes, you can. You can pour it from a 2.5 gallon container, 1 gallon of a Tier 2 material, not a Tier 1. If you want guidance on developing, if you want to make your own closed system, we have a document available. It's called HS Report 1899. If you go to our website, which is cdpr.ca.gov, and go to our publications and type in HS Report 1899, this will come up. Guidelines for developing and manufacturing a closed system compliant with the requirements of Title III, blah, blah, blah. In other words, yeah, if you want to do it yourself, there's the directions. Also, if you go to our website, there are schematics for developing I believe it's a isolated hand pour system. So if you want to build it, and the blueprints are available. Now we're going to talk about PPE. What is the function of PPE? Body coverage, eye protection, extremities protection. In 2008, we amended the respirator regulations. Everybody remember those? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, got them tattooed right here, right? Yeah. So, to remove ambiguity, provide clarity, delineate responsibilities, and all the updated technology that's come up with respirators. Well, after we looked at the respirator ones, we thought, PPE should be updated too. So, PPE, the regulations were updated. They were reorganized into 5 sections. Section 1 was care of PPE. We talk about employers. Who is always ultimately responsible? Employers are ultimately responsible. And another thing, though, who does not have to follow these regulations for themselves? Employers. What do you have to follow, though? Starts with an L. Label. Yeah. You always have to follow a label. However, these regulations here in California only apply to employees. Just like OSHA, only applies to employees. So employers cannot necessarily do this stuff. They have to follow a label, though. Employers shall provide all necessary PPE as required by label, permit, condition, regulation, keep it clean, good repair, inspected daily. Heavily contaminated PPE shall be replaced. So, if your employee brings back some PPE, like a coverall, and it's kind of smoldering and catching fire, it's probably time to replace it. Store PPE in a specifically designated pesticide-free area. That means not in the shed with the pesticides. That's come up. Leather gloves used with phosphides shall be aerated for a minimum of 12 hours for cleaning. If you use phostoxin, magtoxin, the way you clean the gloves is you do that. That's considered cleaning those gloves. Make sure the PPE is used properly. Okay, I'm your employee. These are my safety glasses. Do I have them on?
Yes.
Yeah. Do I have them on?
No.
Yes, I do. Are they on properly?
No.
No. If I come up to you and my Tyveks are zipped down to here, do I have my Tyvek on?
No.
Is it on properly?
No.
That's what we're talking about. Properly using your PPE, that they're properly wearing it. Store and wash PPE separate from other laundry, dry PPE properly. Never allow contaminated PPE to be taken home. If they do not return to headquarters, you must provide them a sealable container. You'd be surprised on how many people did not know what I got a question from our Southern Regional Office. What's a sealable container? So I looked it up. I researched it. It's a container that can be sealed. That's why they pay me the big bucks. So, no, they were wondering, what's a sealable container? Well, okay. And why do we want stuff in sealable containers, contaminated clothing? You take this clothing home, you put it in a non-sealed container, who can access it? The kids, they want to play dress up, or the dog, because, pesticides smell bad, and what do dogs like to do? Bury their face in it. Yeah. So what we want to do with a sealable container is prevent inadvertent, accidental exposure to people. Kids, dogs. Cats, I don't care. Kids, dogs, yeah, you want to take care of them. So that's why sealable container. Make sure that, and sealable containers include things like a garbage bag. Can you seal a garbage bag?
No.
Yes, you can. Spin it around, tie it in a knot. Or use a zip tie. You know those Homer buckets you get at Home Depot? Those orange buckets with a lid, is that sealable? Yeah. How about that? I've seen huge Ziploc bags. Is that sealable?
Yeah.
How about a paper bag?
No.
Not really, no. Finally, make sure the personnel maintaining clean PPE know what they're doing. In other words, they're playing with pesticide-contaminated clothing. Okay. Sealable container. Sealable container. Sealable container. Cat fits in there. Okay. Employer shall ensure, now we're into 6738.1. Here we were in earlier 6738. 6738.1, we're talking about actual use, okay, in the regulations. Employer shall ensure employees wear eye protection, which has its own section, when mixing, loading, or applying pesticides by hand or ground rig or otherwise exposed to contaminated equipment. We also talk about chemical-resistant gloves, which also has its own subsection, point 3, when mixing, loading, or applying pesticides. Employer shall ensure employees wear chemical-resistant footwear, boots, shoes, or shoe covering when required. Great, great, great. This is good. Chemical-resistant, irrigator boots, rubber, stuff doesn't get through them. Is that okay? How about these?
No.
No. Why? Two reasons. One is what? This is leather. And how is leather put together? And a stitch is what?
A hole.
It's a hole with a wick. So, yeah, it can bring stuff in. We've had cases where people got stuff on there, and it goes right through their boot. One guy had 70% cholinesterase inhibition. We ultimately tracked it back to his boot that had gotten some concentrate on it. So, no, these do not cut the mustard. If they're out there helping you, make sure they got them, okay? These are considered good. Irrigator boots, one piece, rubber, no seams, chemical resistant, they'll do the job. Or if you have employees who want to wear their shoes and you want to put shoe coverings on, there are rubber shoe coverings that you put their foot in there and then they strap it closed and boom, they can wear their shoes, but they still have chemical resistant shoe covers on. Or you can get chemical resistant shoes. Those are fine too. Or if you're going to be going to St. Stan's for a beer after work, and you got to be fashionable, there you go, more coverings. And this thing here can puncture the foil too. You must have chemical resistant hood or wide brim hat when chemical resistant head protection is required by the label. What does that mean? Chemical resistant hood or wide brim hat? Well, there's that. Very fashionable. You'll notice the model is facing away. They're embarrassed. They wanted to get a more respectable gig for the advertising, like working a Ducalax commercial or something. But no, they got this, having to wear that ugly thing. But that is a wide brim chemical resistant hat. That's a hood. Another happy individual wearing this stuff. Chemical resistant hood. There we go. There's somebody happy. Oh, they're facing you, but they're mannequins. So, yeah. A sou'wester, chemical resistant. This, if there's nothing specific on the regulation about head protection or the label about head protection, and you're allowing your employees to wear this, not such a good idea, because what does this stuff do? Absorbs and transports and puts right where? Right against the brain. Yeah, it's wonderful. So we strongly suggest you don't use those. If you want to have your employees wear a hat out there, bump caps. Not hard hats. Bump caps. Bump caps caps are cheap. Hard hats are expensive. They have a standard they have to meet. Bump caps, on the other hand, they're plastic, non-absorbent. You throw them in the dishwasher, boom, you're done. Better way to go. If your employees want to wear a hat, and it's not necessarily required by the label, that's not so good. That's a much better idea. Just saying. No, that one will not fulfill the requirements. And there we go again. See, he must be working in the pharmaceutical industry, and he got into some of the stuff. That's why he's smiling now. But he has the hood on. How about this? It's wide brim. But what's wrong with it? Absorptive, yes. How about that? Actually, that is not a plastic, that's an actual hard hat. It's an ASTM certified hard hat that you can get. You could wear that in a hard hat required area. But you'll notice, what did we talk about earlier? Non-absorptive, chemical resistant, and wide brim. Is this chemical resistant? Sure. Is it wide brim? Could you wear that? Yes, you could. You could wear that. It is a wide brim and it's chemical resistant. Of course, it costs about $150 because it is an ASTM certified hard hat. But hey, gotta look cool. Like this person here. If you're wearing the right head protection, you can get the cheese. Now, employer shall employees wear coveralls when handling Category 1. Yeah, this whole Category 1-2 stuff, we haven't abandoned it completely. We're just not using it for closed systems. For PPE, we are still using Category 1, Category 2, Category 3 as the signifiers for what type of PPE you're supposed to wear. So, Category 1, which is what?
Danger.
Category 2, which is? Yeah. So, if you have to wear coveralls when you're dealing with Category 1, Category 2. Coveralls are cotton or uncoated synthetics. Cotton, uncoated synthetic. You know, I shouldn't be saying Tyvek because that's a trade name, and they don't like you saying the trade name. You know, they don't want to end up like linoleum and aspirin did, lost their trademark on it. But and by the way, if this whole requirement for coveralls does not apply to fumigants unless the label says otherwise. Okay, so uncoated Tyvek, cotton. And I strongly suggest if you have some employees doing pesticide applications over near the jail, they don't wear this one in particular. Okay, just, I don't know, some reason. Now, chemical-resistant apron must be worn when required. Chemical-resistant coveralls when required. And previously we talked about coveralls. Category 1, Category 2. Now, if the label says it has to be chemical-resistant coveralls, different thing. Chemical-resistant coveralls are things like Tyvek with coating or PVC suits, and we'll show about that in a few minutes. And by the way, we still have the 80-85 heat stress regulation, which is different from OSHA's heat illness standard, 3395, which still applies, by the way. We've had this 80-85 degree standard way before OSHA did for mixer loaders, applicators, that if they have to wear chemical resistant clothing, you have to have some mechanism to prevent heat stress. That can be chill vests, air conditioned cabs, rest work cycles, different ways, but you have to have some mechanism to prevent them from getting heat stress. So aprons. Is that a good apron? It's made out of rubber. Is that good? Can you use that in pesticides? Yes, you can. How about that one? Chemical resistant. He's more serious. Look at that. He's got the gloves and the things. How about this guy? No, Geppetto cannot do pesticides. Why? Leather. Yes. That's no good. And why is this one no good? Stripes and pattern, no good. And cotton too, so. How about these guys? What's wrong with GQ up here? It's not close. Is he wearing PPE?
Yeah.
Is he wearing it properly?
No.
No. If he buttons up, would he be good?
Yeah.
Yes, he would. How about this? Tyvek QC. QC is a trade name for one of their coatings. I think it's a polyethylene coating of some kind. So it's a coated Tyvek. Is that okay for chemical resistance? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This guy here is, oh, oops, let's go back. This guy here, same thing here. Check out the gloves. He's got them taped on there. Is that all right? Yes, it is. Hazmat crews do it all the time. If you've got gloves on and coveralls, or if you're spraying upwards, the cuff of your shirt should be where? Under the gloves. If you're spraying downward, where should your sleeves be?
On top.
Outside, so that the stuff spills out if it gets on there. But what if you're doing this?
Tape.
Tape. Tape is allowed. In fact, there is a NIOSH approved tape, I think, for hazmat crews. You don't have to go crazy. Duct tape's fine. And by the way, coveralls are not necessarily one piece. They can also be, by our definition, in our regulation, they can be two-piece. Two-piece coveralls. As long as they are what? Chemical resistant. This guy's going big time. Is he looking good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Problem is he's applying Roundup. Ooh, man. He's got to worry. I don't know. Now, on the other hand, this must have been San Joaquin County, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had to be. Yeah, okay. But, all is not lost.
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay. And by the way, like I said, all of our employees are still also under 3395, the heat stress standard of OSHA. So keep that in mind. And they have to be trained according in our handler training, field worker, and early reentry worker regulations. They have to be made aware of 3395. Cooling systems. There are simple cooling systems. These are relatively inexpensive. They work very well. Chill vests. You put packets of ice systems in there, and they'll keep you cold for like 2 hours. My neighbor borrowed one from me. I had, and he was working in his attic in August, and he came out alive. So yes, these work very well for keeping the core temperature down. There's a little more expensive version of it, and if you got money to burn, you want to go crazy, you can go get these NASA kind of things here that circulate chilled water, chilled fluid throughout the vest. Those will keep your employees nice and chilled. What would also keep your employees chilled who are doing applications? Yeah, taking this little knob and turning it like that way to air conditioning, that helps. The good news is, when the first OSHA inspector showed up, he did not write them a ticket. He simply had a stroke and died right there. The second, yeah, he wrote the ticket, yeah. Now, 6738.2 is eye protection. Shall assure that employees wear protective eyewear provides brow and temple protection conforming to the curvature of the face. My glasses here, they do not conform to the curvature of the face. These would not pass in any way, shape, or form. They must be ANSI, American National Standards Institute Z87.1 2010 compliant. Now, the key thing is, in terms of the compliance, is it is ANSI compliant, Z87.1. The actual year is really not that important. But if you've bought glasses in the past 5 or 6 years, they are ANSI Z87 2010 more than likely compliant. If you bought glasses from any reputable dealer, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, Gempler's, who else? Anyone who's reputable, and they sold you safety glasses, they are, I'd say 99.9% of the time, they are going to be ANSI compliant. If you went down to the flea market and bought 10 for $1, I'd be leery about it, especially if the ANSI standard is written on in pencil. Okay? And this applies to safety glasses, goggles, and face shields. No, not this. I know it's glasses, and he thinks he's safe. The real scary part is he was making margaritas, apparently, and now he's going to work with power tools. Okay. Now, these Either. You can't use, these are not compliant either. These are impact, but sports, that's okay. No. You know, I wish the guy had taken a photo like 30 seconds later to see what happens here with the plastic bag over the head. Yeah, that's not really compliant either. These are the new glasses the county will be wearing when they come over and look at your closed systems. They can x-ray them now. Finally, this guy here, that is not ANSI compliant saran wrap across his eyes. This is what we're talking about. They conform to the curvature of the face. See that? Or they'll have a kind of a ridge that conforms to the curvature of the face. So basically what's that doing is preventing stuff that splashes up here from getting down into the eyes rapidly. Here's some more. If you're wearing a full face respirator, that also fulfills the requirement of eye protection. Goggles, indirectly vented and unvented, are the way to go. The key thing is, we realize, now if the label says, wear goggles, what should you wear? Goggles. Yeah, if the label says eye protection, what should you wear? Eye protection, and this is way more comfortable. And we know, technically, these kind of glasses are not as protective as goggles. Because goggles do what? They seal around that thing. Okay? These don't necessarily seal, but we all know, don't lie to me, that as soon as the county drives away during August, and you had those goggles on, where do those goggles end up? Protecting your Adam's apple or your forehead, right? Now, if you're wearing these, you are much more likely, or your employees are much more likely to properly wear them, even though they are slightly less protective. So it is better to have slightly less protective. When that splash comes, it hits what? Yeah. Now, if I've got goggles on and they're down here and that splash comes, where do they hit?
Your eye.
Yeah. So make sure, I'm a big fan of eye protection. Democrat, Republican, commie, SOB. Eye protection is always a good idea. And what is he doing? He's putting on his safety glasses. I'll be so glad. When he leaves, I don't know what I'm going to do with this slide. And like I said, I'm a big push for safety glasses. Big push. Why? 300,000 occupational, 2012. 20,000 resulted in loss of work time. Serious. 90% of those could be prevented if they'd worn safety glasses. Do you have to fit test safety glasses? No. Do you have to have medicals to have safety glasses?
No.
And you got how many eyes? Okay, how many have heard of skin grafts? How many have heard of eye grafts? Well, glass ones, but yeah. Eye protection. Strongly suggest no matter what the exemptions we're going to talk about in a little while say, no matter what those exemptions say, skip the exemptions. Have your employees always wear safety glasses. The moment they start the clock to they're off the clock. Wear safety glasses. Once again, here we go. That's where we are. 15% of injuries from chemicals and chemical products. The Army has a protocol for dealing with eye protection. You'll notice this guy has these odd-looking freckles down below. Something blew up in his face. But you'll notice where they don't show up. Around his eyes. He was wearing what?
Eye protection.
Eye protection. Oh, they got some good pictures online. You don't want to see them either. But this just shows you. It stopped the impactor. It stopped the impactor. This was not Z87 compliant glasses. That thing went in pretty deep. It would have punctured the eye. So, I'm a big fan. Eye protection. Now let's go on to something, sure, if the label identifies specific protective eyewear, you must wear that. If it says goggles, wear goggles. If it says wear an old candy bucket that's translucent, you wear an old candy bucket that's translucent. But, you know, I don't think you'll see that. NIOSH-approved full-face respirator satisfies the requirement. If you have prescriptive eyewear, it cannot interfere with the function of the protective eyewear. There are, it's called over-glasses or visitor glasses that can fit over prescriptive eyeglasses and are safety glasses. Or you can also get, these actually, even though they're not Z87 frames, I have what's considered Z87 glasses, lenses in them, polycarbonate lenses.
They don't wrap around your eye.
They don't, so these would not, I could not do pesticide applications with these.
You can't get a prescription that wraps around the eye.
Get something close. Well, you can get ones that have the ledges and the side shields and are flat. You can get that too.
But you can't get...
Oh, you can, yeah, that one, yeah.
They won't do that.
Hand protection. Chemical-resistant gloves are required. If the barrier material is specified by a glove category, that material must be used. The glove category selection key card. Everybody get one of those cards back there? See, I come bearing gifts. Got the cards. You have to use this card. This card gives you an idea of what those codes mean on the pesticide labels. If there is no specific glove material identified on the label, it says use chemical-resistant gloves, then any of the gloves listed on the DPR glove category selection key card may be used. Now, if it says you have to use a specific type of glove, you have to use that specific type of glove. But here's the card, basically the big version of it. These are now required by law. You may see some old versions that used to say recommended by DPR. They're still good, this part, but now it's required by law. And these materials are laminate, butyl, nitrile, neoprene, poly, PVC, and Viton. All but the poly and the laminate must be 14 mils or thicker, which really isn't that thick. Poly is kind of not very useful in the field. It's the ones they use for making sandwiches at Togo's. So, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of abrasion resistance. Chemical-resistant gloves, none are really truly chemical proof. Stuff will always get through. And by the way, these gloves, the type of glove they want you to wear is not based on the pesticide, the active. It's based on the inerts, which you don't get to know. It's trade secret. But it's based on the inerts, the solvent systems that are used in there. There we go. That's laminate right there. Other than laminate and polyethylene, all gloves must be 14 mils or thicker. We do have an exemption for tasks requiring fine motor skills and dexterity. Thinner gloves of the same material may be substituted for a maximum of 15 minutes or till the task is accomplished. So say you need to do some nozzle work. You can put on the thinner gloves, do the nozzle work. Say it takes 2 minutes. Can you wear those gloves for 13 more minutes and do application?
No.
No. You have application gloves and you have special task gloves, the thinner ones. Can you put, this is a question came up. Say you know you're going to be doing something that requires fine motor dexterity for more than 15 minutes. Can you put 2 sets of gloves on? Well, yeah, but it kind of defeats the whole purpose because you now have a bunch of thick gloves over your hands. So, separable glove liners are allowed unless expressly forbidden by the labels. Liners must not extend beyond the cuff. Contaminated liners must be removed immediately and disposed of. And you cannot have flocked gloves. No flocking, ever. No. I think I covered every language here. That's flocking. Not allowed. And these kind of cotton thingies, not allowed. Leather gloves may be worn over chemical-resistant gloves if required by work environment. What work environment would that be? Come on. It's Valentine's Day coming up. The people who grow roses. Because roses got what? No, they don't. They told me about that in the rose industry. Roses do not have thorns. They have prickles. Yep, they're picky about it. Oh, that's not a thorn. That's a prickle. Then they'll point at me. I don't know. So yeah, chemical-resistant gloves. And once you've used those leather gloves for that purpose, they must always be worn over chemical-resistant gloves. But in the rose industry, those kind of leather gloves, they're kind of disposables. They shred them very rapidly over time. Here are some of the exemptions now. Glove and eye protection exemptions include closed cabs, wheel mount nozzles below and behind the employee, long-handled vertebrate, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, these are exemptions. What do I think of this exemption? You should always wear eye protection. Ignore that part of the exemption. Always wear. That's my opinion, by the way. That's just my opinion. As an industrial hygienist who can show you really gory pictures. So, yeah, whatever. Well, yeah, if you're playing with that to kill bugs, you might want to definitely have eye protection on. Closed system exemption, if it's danger or warning, signal word. Once again, I said the signal words are not completely abandoned. They control PPE. If it's danger or warning signal words in a closed system, you have to wear protective eyewear. Good. Coveralls, chemical-resistant gloves, and chemical-resistant apron, regardless of what the label says. It allows you to wear a lower level of protection. One of the big things it allows you not to have to wear is what?
Respirator.
Yes. In many cases, you don't have to wear a respirator if you're using a closed system. Caution, if you use a Category 3 material in a closed system, all you have to wear is protective eyewear, work clothing. It allows you to get much less lower level of protection. Finally, work clothing may be worn in lieu of dermal PPE when applying from an enclosed cab. And there's the pilot exemption, respiratory protection, and protective footwear are not required when you're occupying the aircraft, and helmet and visor substitutes for eye and head protection in an enclosed cab. Finally, real quickly, we're almost done. This is what kills you at work. These are the things that kill you at work. They're out of order. Look at them. Put them in order. What are the top three? Do you have it in mind? Keep it in your mind. Okay. No, falls way down there. Transportation kills you 40% of the time. The fatality is associated with transportation. In California, 34% of the time. Homicide, 17% of the time. 23% of the time in California. Aren't we friendly here? Misadventure with equipment, 15 and 13. Falls is way down there. Come on, fall, boom, 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 boom. Falls, 14. Harmful substances and environments, that's where pesticides would be found. 9%, 12% in California. Finally, fires and explosions. That must be a fun time. 3% of the fatalities. And it hasn't changed. This is 2012. That was 2011 data. It really doesn't change statistically. Finally, does this guy look good? Coveralls, gloves, eye protection, respiratory protection. He's doing well. The key thing is, with PPE and closed systems, you must protect your ass. Or mule, however you want to call it. Donkey, whatever. And remember, even Major League drug lord kingpins out of New Mexico, if you've ever seen that show, I loved it because they wore the appropriate PPE. They were wearing the right stuff for making these drugs. You all know her, right? Yeah. She's outdated. Now she's safe. Or protected, I should say. So, if you have any questions, you can contact me at, the easiest way to get a hold of me is harvard.fong@cdpr.ca.gov. And this is our website, cdpr.ca.gov. We have a health and safety section. Everything I talked about in terms of forums or publications is available there. There we go. Engineering controls, personal protective equipment, and reducing exposure. It's all there. And finally, we're working on a combination PPE and closed system. We'll make your employee part of the closed system. He will join the Borg collective. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.